This is the Executive Committee meeting of SANDAG on Friday, April 9, 2021. Do we have any non-agenda public comments?
No, Chair, I don't see any hands from the public.
Okay, do we have any non-agenda comments from board members? Let me take a look here. I do not see any hands up. So we will go to our Executive Director's report. I'd like to call on our Executive Director, Hassan.
Thank you, Chair Blakespear. Good morning, committee members. Before I begin my update, I want to take a moment to recognize a state legislator, Jim Mills, who passed away recently. As many of you know, Jim was what's called the father of the San Diego trolley. In 1975, he authored legislation that was instrumental in the creation of the trolley system. Jim's legislation now is used as a national model of how to move forward when it comes to transit. Jim has also authored legislation that created the Old Town State Park, helped secure funding for critical projects throughout the region, including the restoration of the old Globe Theater, the library at San Diego State University, and Thurgood Marshall College at UC San Diego. We are very fortunate to have had visionary like Jim, and we are grateful for his many contributions to the region. Couple of updates on the programs. On the regional plan, projects and Transnet. In the board meeting today, you will hear about transportation technologies that are transforming future mobility options for our regional plan. What was once the norm 20 years ago has been overtaken by the Internet of Things, big data, and artificial intelligence. This led to the development of mobility solutions that didn't exist previously and could not have been planned for the last 20 years. I bring this to your attention so that we can begin to consider the reasons why some of the projects that we're used to is not going to make it in the next regional transportation plan. Some of the project is going to be out, some new ones will come in, and I'm sure you're going to hear a lot of discussion about that. But today is going to give you a glimpse of why some of these projects are not going to be in. Given that we are looking at criteria like social equity, technology, and changing need in our region, the mix of projects that will be in the plan will definitely be impacted. You don't have to wait long. By May 28th, when we release the regional transportation plan, you're going to see the projects that's going to make the plan, the 2020 regional transportation plan. Let me go a little bit into funding. There is something called CRESA funds, CRRSSAA. I have some good news to report to you. In addition to the $10.5 million that we got last week from the California Transportation Commission to do the temporary fixes of the bluff, the CTC allocated additional resources. They distribute what we call the Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriation Act, or CRESA, the Transportation Improvement Program, the STEP. And so we are getting about $28.5 million in one-time funding. That's some good news. And we're grateful for the California Transportation Commission to do that. Since the 2022 STEP development cycle has begun, we recommend programming $13.5 million in new STEP CRESA funds during the regular STEP programming cycle. Which means we will be coming to the Transportation Committee and the Board of Directors to do that. We are going to be recommending some significant allocation of these funds. We're talking about delaying some projects because of the cash flow. Some of these projects are in the bike program, and so we're going to recommend that these $13.5 million come to the bike program so there is no delays. Obviously, significant decision points that are going to be included in the budget. The nearly $15 million coming directly through federal formula distribution will be incorporated in the fiscal 2022 budget that will be coming to you shortly. This is good news because this is additional funds that's going to allow projects like the bike projects to move forward without any delays. A little bit about President Biden job plan. The America's Job Plan aligns exactly with the work we are doing at Sandag. Just like the principles in President Biden's plan, Sandag is planning for tomorrow's mobility system, focusing on equity, climate, and building the economy. As you know, we are ahead of the game, way ahead of the game when it came to what we think we should focus on in the future. We see connection to many of the projects that we're working on. The Otay Mesa East border crossing, the Central Mobility Hub, the regional plan, the Mid-Coast Trolley, and our work to stabilize the Del Mar Bluff and eventually move the tracks off the bluff. For those projects and more, it is imperative to get support from our both state and federal partners. President Biden's American Job Plan could ensure long-term investment on some of the regions and nation's most significant projects nested here in San Diego. Right now, our region has over 120 projects worth $1.9 billion that are shovel-ready. Our teams are working with all of you to make sure that we be ready to submit that list and that stimulus become effective. We anticipate working with our congressional delegation to make sure we're most effective in gaining federal money. A little bit update on Del Mar Bluff stabilization. Our teams continue to work with NCTD for the emergency repair. This weekend, there will be a full closures between Oceanside and downtown San Diego, while crew continue to do important emergency work. Additional closures are also planned between Solana Beach and downtown San Diego Monday, April 12th, and during the next several weeks. This closure will allow crews to do work safely. We'll continue to coordinate with our partners to make sure that our residents are safe when it comes to the bluff and the danger of the bluff collapse. The emergency work, as I said last time, will continue through July. Long term, we must move. I keep saying that every meeting because I want to make sure that I'm not ambiguous about it. We must sure, I recommend very strongly that move that track inland. And we are in the middle of a study to look at options of how we do that. We also convened the San Diego Regional Rail Corridor Executive Leadership Task Force, whose first meeting is next Monday. This task force will be led by our chairwoman, Mayor Blake Spear. The Mid-Coast Rally is on schedule, on budget. We're finishing the final touches, preparing for later this year to open this amazing project for San Diego. San Diego is working with Caltrans to realign the roadway, which will provide direct access to the future UC San Diego Health La Jolla Trolley Station and improve access to neuropay medical access. This month, we will reach a construction milestone on all lanes when the improved Campus Point Drive opens to the public. Chairwoman, that concludes my report. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. We do have a question from Mayor Hall.
Yeah, on the list that you're sending to.
Wait, hold on a second. Hassan, I think you need to put yourself on mute. Okay, that's better. Okay, go ahead, Mayor Hall.
I'm sorry. On the list that you're sending to DC, have we seen that list?
No, we're putting it together. We have asked the cities and the county and stakeholder to submit to us, but we do have a list and you will see it before we send it over.
Okay, is I-5 on that list? Of the north section? I didn't hear the response.
There is a lot of projects in that list, so I will check and get back to you.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions from board members? I don't see any other hands up. Thank you for the report, Hassan. And also just to clarify, so the executive director's report will not be repeated at the board meeting today. We have a really packed agenda. So this will be the only time that this group of the board members hears the executive director report. So with that, let's move to our consent calendar. If there are no questions about consent, I would entertain a motion.
Second.
Okay, great. We have a motion by Mayor Sotelo Solis and a second by Mayor Gloria. So Francesca, let's take the vote, please.
Thank you, Chair. For the City of San Diego, Vice Chair Gloria.
Aye.
Thank you. For the County of San Diego, Supervisor Lawson Reamer.
Aye.
Thank you. For East County, Mayor Vasquez.
Aye.
Thank you. For North County Coastal, Chair Blakespear.
Aye.
Thank you. For North County Inland, Mayor Voss. Mayor Voss, I see you're unmuted, but I didn't hear your response.
Mayor Vasquez, aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. And for South County, Mayor Sotelo Solis.
Sotelo Solis, aye.
Thank you very much. And that does pass unanimously.
Okay, thank you. Now we're moving on to a review of our draft agendas. So I will call on Victoria.
Good morning. For your draft April 23rd Board of Directors agenda, we have item number 1, which is public comments, followed by item number 2, which is the Executive Director's Report. Item number 3 is really the main item. It's the 2021 Regional Plan Equity Considerations. We'll be talking about the importance of bringing equity into the planning process, and this is for discussion. On your consent calendar, we'll have item number 4, which is the approval of the meeting minutes, all followed by item number 5, which is the policy advisory committee actions. And this also has a CEQA exemption. Item number 6 is the Federal Transit Administration Section 5311 Program of Projects. This will be coming up from the Transportation Committee and we'll be looking for an approve. Item number 7, we're looking to move to a future meeting. So we'll be taking that off. Item number 8 is FY22 Transit Capital Improvement Program. Kim Manassi will be seeking an approval, and this is coming up from the Transportation Committee for MTS and NCTD's capital program. Item number 9 is the Regional Active Transportation Program funding recommendations. This is also coming from Transportation. Looking for an approve. Item number 10 is the proposed contract amendment for the centralized train control contract capacity increase to increase it 360,000. Item number 11 is the Executive Director Delegated Actions. This is for information. Item number 12 is the meeting and events attended on behalf of SANDAG, followed by your quarterly finance report through March 2021. And under reports, we have the first reading of the proposed amendments to the Transnet Extension Ordinance that will be presented by Andre. This concludes the April 23rd agenda. Shall I move on to the draft April 30th agenda as well?
Yes, please. Thank you.
So item number 1 is public comment, followed by item number 2, which is the Executive Director's Report. Under reports, we have item number 3, which is the 2021 Regional Plan aligning state, regional, and local planning. And so we'll be talking about how to use state policies to support the local planning efforts that we're doing here related to the plan. And then item number 4, we're looking to possibly move this item to the Transportation Committee. So that concludes the April 30th agenda.
Okay, thank you. And we can go to the next one.
And one more thing, staff would also like to add a closed session item. Sorry, I forgot. So April 30th would have your RTP update and then also a closed session. All right, so last but not least, the draft May 14th Board of Directors meeting agenda includes public comments, followed by the Executive Director's report. Under consent, we have approval of the meeting minutes, followed by Policy Advisory Committee actions. Item number 5 is the DBE triennial goals. Item number 6 is the FY22 weighted vote formula coming from the Department of Finance. Item number 7 is the Executive Director delegated action. Under Chair's report, item number 8 is looking for an approval where you'll be approving the public members of the Audit Committee. Under reports, we'll have the second reading of the Transnet extension, and number 10 is the proposed final 2022 program budget for the agency. Item number 11 is the last item, and Linda will be providing an update on the Lausanne Rail Corridor study to look at the solutions for the Delmar Bliss. That concludes the May 14th agenda.
Okay, thank you. If there are no hands, which I don't see any, I would entertain a motion to approve.
Move approval.
Second.
Okay, thank
Mayor-
you.
Yes.
We have a motion from Vice Chair Gloria and a second from Mayor Vasquez.
Thank you, Chair. For the City of San Diego, Vice Chair Gloria.
Aye.
Thank you. For the County of San Diego, Supervisor Lawson Reamer.
Aye.
Thank you. For East County, Mayor Vasquez.
Aye.
Thank you. For North County Coastal, Chair Blakespear.
Aye.
Thank you. For North County Inland, Mayor Voss.
Aye.
Thank you. And for South County, Mayor Sotelo Solis.
Sotelo Solis, aye.
Thank you. And that does pass unanimously.
Okay, thank you. So next up, we have item number 5, which is proposed amendments to board policies and bylaws. And I'll call on Amber Lynn.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning. Throughout the year, the Office of General Counsel solicits requests for potential changes to SANDAG's bylaws and board policies, and the Executive Committee and subsequently the Board of Directors have an annual process to review these proposed changes. This year, we are proposing amendments to the bylaws and 12 of the board policies. Each of these is attached to your report in red line format. For each of the potential updates, I'll discuss the more significant amendments being proposed, referring to the online page number where the changes are reflected. Proposed amendments are intended to address changes in the law, clarify responsibilities, and with this round, address the agency's action plan for implementing the salary and performance audit recommendations, which were adopted by the board at the end of last year. The Office of General Counsel sought feedback from the independent performance auditor for those changes related to the audit action plan, and I'll be sure to point those out along the way. Please feel free to stop me at any time should you have any questions on a proposed change. So we'll start with the bylaws, which begins at page 16 of your agenda. The proposed amendments to Article 2, Section 5 are intended to clarify the criteria for receipt of the stipend allowance for attendance at board and policy advisory committee meetings, working group meetings, and other events. The current bylaws state that the chair of the board shall receive a monthly compensation of $700 per month, and the first and second vice chair of the board shall receive monthly compensation of $350 per month. This compensation is in addition to compensation for attendance at board meetings. The proposed changes seek to clarify the activities for which the board chair and vice chairs receive the stipend, and proposes to add language specifying that the monthly stipend includes compensation for attendance at one in-person staff briefing per scheduled meeting of the board. Section G proposes new language, which would allow compensation to the chair and vice chair of the PACs for in-person participation at monthly briefings. With this new provision, the PAC chair and vice chair would receive compensation of $100 for attendance at one in-person staff briefing per scheduled meeting of their respective PAC. This proposed addition is intended to recognize the time committed to fulfilling the duties as the chair and vice chair of a PAC, including the travel time associated with in-person meetings, and to ensure that they are meaningfully engaged in the role. Considering the meeting schedule of the PACs, this could result in a budget impact of approximately $19,000 per year, assuming in-person attendance by the chair and vice chair of every PAC at every meeting. Those stipends are budgeted annually and paid out of a mixture of member assessments and Transnet administration funds. Article 5, Section 4, and Article 6, Section 3 propose to permit the Executive Director and the Director of Finance to use alternative titles. This would allow the Executive Director to also be known as the Chief Executive Officer and the Director of Finance to be known as the Chief Financial Officer. Article 5, Section 4 also includes substantive changes designed to address the agency's action plan for implementing the salary and performance audit recommendations. And those proposed edits clarify the scope of responsibility of the Executive Director to develop and maintain an employee handbook and to administer Sandag's personnel system. Finally, Article 6, Section 5 is an update to the bylaws to maintain consistency in the delegation of authority to the Executive Director between the bylaws and the current Board Policy 17. Moving on to Board Policy 1, which is the allocation of board and PAC responsibilities, which begins on page 29 of your agenda. Proposed edits to Section 3.2 address another recommendation from the Audit Action Plan. This section aims to clarify the authority of board leadership to act on behalf of the Executive Committee when timing requires, and it includes a reporting requirement when that authority is exercised. With Section 4.1.4, staff seeks authority to streamline the grant application process for transportation projects, particularly since many have a short application period. Any projects submitted in connection with a grant application are already consistent with the regional plan priorities that are approved by the board. Section 4.1.22 seeks to clarify the role of the Transportation Committee regarding oversight of Transnet compliance audits, which is consistent with the Transnet ordinance. The ordinance states that ITOC conducts and approves the annual Transnet audit and then shares the audit with the TC, but ultimately approval lies with the ITOC, so those proposed changes would clarify those responsibilities. Board Policy 3 is Sandag's investment policy, beginning on page 36 of your agenda. And at Section 11, changes are proposed to more accurately reflect the reporting requirements consistent with state law. And the proposed language clarifies that in addition to presenting an annual statement of investment policy at a public meeting, any interim changes to that policy must also be considered at a public meeting. Board Policy 4, which is your rules of procedure, begins on page 45 of your agenda. And it proposes amendments to clarify, Section 4 proposes amendments to clarify responsibilities with regard to Form 700 filings. It adds language to clarify that a Form 700 is required for advisory members as well as voting members for committees or working groups that are covered by the Brown Act. It also adds a requirement that those members who have not filed a Form 700 are not permitted to vote. And while this is rarely an issue for the board or PAC members to fail to file their Form 700, it does occasionally happen with working group members. And this is intended to ensure that there's transparency with regard to any conflicts of interest when a vote is taken. Section 7.4 proposes amendments to align with existing provisions of Board Policy 1, which already state that all items delegated to the PACs are subject to board ratification. So this would clarify that legislative bodies that are created by the board or a PAC do not have the authority to act on behalf of Sandag unless that authority has been delegated to them and then ratified by the board, consistent with Board Policy 1. Board Policy 8, which begins on page 59 of your agenda, proposes a minor change to reflect the existing practice of bringing to you the delegated actions report on a monthly basis at the board business meeting. Board Policy 11, which is the travel policy, begins on page 65 of your agenda. And Sandag Management has partnered with the independent performance auditor to implement travel practices that better align with those of its funding agencies. The proposed amendments to Board Policy 11 are substantive in nature, and they are consistent with the General Services Administration or GSA travel guidelines, particularly as to per diem rates and meal and lodging reimbursements. The proposed language is modeled largely on the City of San Diego's current travel policy, combined with Sandag's existing internal processes. And this policy is intended to ensure transparency by requiring any exceptions to the policy to be reported out to the board. And then upon consideration of the travel policy by the Executive Committee and the board, Sandag Management will continue to collaborate with the independent performance auditor to develop the internal administrative procedures to implement any adopted policy. Next up are a batch of procurement policies. And the amendments proposed to Sandag's 3 procurement policies, which are Board Policy 16 related to procurements for services, Board Policy 23 relating to procurements for equipment and supplies, and Board Policy 24 related to procurements for construction. Those begin at page 71 of your agenda. Proposed amendments are similar throughout the 3 procurement policies, so I'll describe them at the same time. The amendments propose to revise procurement threshold for micro purchases to align with the amounts that are set by Sandag's funding agencies. For reference, the federal micro purchase amount is currently $10,000 and appears to be moving up regularly, while Sandag's existing policy is set at $3,500. Updates are also proposed throughout to reflect current nomenclature and internal administrative processes. Staff is proposing to add language to reference the special requirements for projects that are funded by Caltrans or FHWA, which is in accordance with Sandag's master agreement with Caltrans governing the use of state funds. And then finally, proposed updates refine language in the 3 policies to better reflect the requirements of state and federal discrimination laws and to remove some out-of-date legal citations. Board Policy 17, which is the delegation of authority, begins at page 84 of your agenda. Proposed amendments to section 4.1 are intended to clarify the authority delegated to the executive director to make modifications to the budget within the amounts that are granted by the board. Changes to section 4.17 and 4.18 specify the circumstances in which the executive director may approve certain types of administrative or minor technical changes to environmental documents and RTIP documents that have been previously approved when those changes are consistent with the applicable law and the agreed upon procedures with the state and federal agencies. Finally, section 5 contains more proposed amendments intended to address the audit action plan. And those proposed changes implement audit recommendations related to the payment and reporting of severance payments to Sandag staff, as well as a new requirement that a copy of Sandag's employee handbook be provided to the board on an annual basis. Board Policy 27 is the Transportation Development Act policy beginning on page 110 of your agenda. The amendments to Board Policy 27 are proposed to address changes to the TDA program following the passage of SB 508, as well as to implement recommendations from a recent TDA audit to ensure compliance with the TDA program. Board Policy 31 is your Transnet Ordinance and Expenditure Rules beginning on page 120 of your agenda. And based on feedback from our member jurisdictions, staff proposes amendments to Rule 23 regarding the implementation of the Regional Transportation Congestion Improvement Program, or RTCIP requirements. This additional language provides guidance to the local agencies regarding the establishment and management of a funding program to collect the RTCIP fees, as well as information on determining when a project may be RTCIP eligible. Board Policy 39 is the policy governing your audit committee, and it begins at page 159 of the agenda. The Sandag Audit Committee has requested various amendments to its policy governing the audit committee. The audit committee requests that either the chair or vice chair position be held by a public member of the audit committee. The current language does not prohibit a public member from being the chair or vice chair. The requested language would make it mandatory, however. The audit committee also proposes to eliminate term limits for board members appointed to the audit committee. And in requesting this change, the audit committee considered the time it takes for a member to become familiar with the auditing processes and the work of the committee. The audit committee also proposes to increase the terms of public members from 2 years to 4 years and to limit public members to 2 consecutive terms. And the audit committee considered the effort required by public members to become familiar with Sandag and its processes and the challenges of recruiting public members to participate in this voluntary effort, while balancing that against the need for new perspectives over time. Finally, Sandag is undergoing changes to its organizational structure in accordance with the staffing plan that was approved by the board in the current budget and seeks to modify certain job titles referenced throughout the various board policies. The current title, revised title, and the impacted board policy are set forth in the chart at page 3 of your report or page 15 in the online version. Staff seeks the authority to revise those titles in the impacted board policies as reflected in that chart. That includes a summary of the proposed board policy updates. Article 9 of the bylaws states that prior to be taken to the Board of Directors for approval, proposed amendments should be taken to the Executive Committee preliminarily for review and discussion, and then brought to the Executive Committee at a subsequent meeting for a recommendation for approval to the board. This requirement is advisory, not mandatory, and the Executive Committee has previously moved items directly to the board without considering them twice. Therefore, the Executive Committee is asked to discuss the proposed bylaws and board policy amendments and either recommend that the Board of Directors approve those proposed amendments or direct staff to return to the Executive Committee for further discussion or review. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you very much for that update. I see that Mayor Voss has turned on his camera. I wonder if he was trying to make a comment, raise his hand.
You saved me having to raise my hand. Thank you. With regard to board compensation, in these days of tight budgets, I'm a little bit curious as to why we have, I think, 3 full-time mayors with quite nice salaries on the board and supervisors with quite nice salaries. Why are they compensated additionally for board leadership positions, even for attendance at board meetings? I think the public looking at this, let's say in the case of a supervisor making $200,000 a year or a mayor making that, it would seem like we could save just a little bit of money. So I'm troubled that continues. It's been in the back of my mind for a while.
Certainly, Mayor Voss. If I could just add to the discussion, there is a statutory requirement in Sandag's enabling legislation that does state that the chairperson of the board is entitled to additional monthly compensation, an amount that's established by the board. All other compensation and the amount is certainly at the discretion of the board.
Thank you for that information. Yeah, I think it's something the board should look at.
I think it's a good point. Let's see if there are other comments. I did have a couple questions about the audit committee recommendations, particularly the one about the chair being the public member and not a board member. The connection between the audit committee and the board of Sandag seems really important to me. And so I just wanted to understand that and see if there was any other board comment on that. I mean, executive committee comment on that or thought. Mayor Jones.
I wanted to discuss real quick about compensation. I think this should be a public discussion. I think with so many people hit so hard by COVID, I think it's really important for us to have these discussions out in the public. I myself make less than $12,000 a year. I don't do this job for the money. I do this job because I love to serve the community and also the residents of San Diego County when I'm wearing my Sandag board hat. So I do think this should be something that's agendized. And I am a little confused about agendizing an item for board discussion. And I think it would be timely for us to have an update on that, because I know I've spoken to a couple of other board members and we're all kind of confused as to what that process is. And I'm not quite sure where that is in our bylaws. Or if it is in our bylaws. So I think that would be an important part of our conversation, as well as how do we get an item put on the agenda.
Okay, any other questions or comments? All right, well, it looks as if, I think the last question about how you put things on the agenda maybe is not specifically related to this item. So we could ask for that to be clarified by the Sandag staff. And I think, I mean, there were a couple different comments from board members, but I'm not seeing any other action from other board members here. So if we want to entertain a motion for this to be recommended to the board as is, we could do that right now. Or if there were any efforts to change it, then it would come back to this executive committee. So I would be open to any suggestions.
I would be
Madam
happy
Chair.
to make, make a motion to refer this to the board for further discussion. However, not suggesting that the executive committee has approved these changes. So I guess my motion would be move it to the board for further discussion without approval.
Okay, I see Mayor Gloria was trying to speak as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's fine. I'm just trying to make sure the business of this agency is happening. So I'm happy to move this on to the full board.
Okay, so was that a second of Mayor Voss's motion?
That's fine. Yeah.
Okay, so that means that we're not recommending approval, we're kicking it to the board to say this is an item we want the board to discuss.
Right.
From where I said, it's about the same difference. So, I mean, the
Okay.
board still has the ultimate approval on it. What we're doing is getting it out of committee into the full body.
Right, okay. Okay, great. Well, we have a motion and a second then.
Thank you very much. For the City of San Diego, Vice Chair Gloria.
Aye.
For the County of San Diego, Supervisor Lawson Reamer.
Sorry for the delay. Aye.
Thank you very much. For East County, Mayor Vasquez.
Mayor Vasquez, aye.
Thank you. For North County Coastal, Chair Blakespear.
Aye.
Thank you. For North County Inland, Mayor Voss.
Aye.
Thank you. And for South County, Mayor Sotelo Solis.
Sotelo Solis, aye.
Thank you. And that does pass unanimously.
Okay, great. So our last item is the monthly legislative report. We know there's a lot going on in DC, and I'll kick it over to Lori.
All right, bear with me. All right, I'll go ahead and start. Can you guys hear me all right?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. All right, yes, thanks for having us for the legislative status report today. My name is Lori Grover. I'll be providing the federal update on for the SANDAG agency. As most of you all know, Congress has brought back a process that some of us know as earmarks. This go around, however, they are rebranding the name to community project funding. In essence, these requests give House members the opportunity to request funding for specific projects that would benefit their districts during the fiscal year 2022, appropriations process or the annual spending bills. There's a lot that we don't know about this process, and it is a rather rushed process to begin with. For example, we don't quite know how much each participating member will have to allocate to projects, but we do know that each House member has the opportunity to submit up to 10 project requests across all the different appropriation subcommittees. Likely only a handful of those project requests will be funded. Most offices are accepting requests from public agencies and not-for-profit agencies, and all project requests need to show community support and ensure the member has no financial interest in the project. Transparency is kind of the name of the game this go around. While each of your jurisdictions may be advocating for local projects, SANDAG is primarily focused on our priority projects, and then looking at which other regional projects are most competitive given the known requirements. We're closely monitoring or closely coordinating with our partner agencies as this process unfolds, and are hopeful that the region will be as successful as possible with these types of opportunities. And in speaking of community support, SANDAG will be supporting projects that are consistent with the regional plan, and I'm happy to continue coordinating with any jurisdiction or agency on any requests. Moving on to the authorization, as most are aware, the current Surface Transportation Authorization Bill, the FAST Act, is set to expire at the end of the federal fiscal year in the fall, September 30th, 2021. Both the House and the Senate have made it clear that they would like to have a bill markup and be out of their respective committees no later than Memorial Day, but that timeline could easily slip given all that is going on in Congress right now. As part of the authorization process, House members are also requesting the inclusion of member designated projects as part of the bill. Funding for these projects will be slightly larger than the amount allocated through the appropriations process. And similar to the appropriations process that I mentioned earlier, SANDAG will be focusing on advancing our priority projects for these submittals. And now to the American Jobs Plan that seems to be making its round in the media. This is a $2.5 billion 8-year $2.5 trillion 8-year investment plan for the nation. For the transportation portion of the plan, Biden intends to spend a quarter of that top dollar figure on rail, transit, EV infrastructure, and more. While the details of the infrastructure plan are yet to be figured out, it is worth noting that investments in infrastructure are targeted to address equity, climate, and building up the economy. Before I wrap up and hand it over to Hector for a borders and binational update, I would just like to say that with all of this that I reported out today, getting one of these items passed this year, be it the annual spending bill, a major reauthorization bill, or an infrastructure package, is a major lift. Getting all three passed in just a few months will be extremely difficult. It will be really interesting to see how this all plays out. We could likely see a continuing resolution for the appropriations process, or a combination of the authorization bill and infrastructure package, or several other permutations. It will definitely be a busy couple of months ahead of us regardless, and I look forward to keeping this team updated as we know more. So with that, I will take a breath and I'll pass it over to Hector for his report.
Thank you, Lori. Good morning, and I'm very pleased to be with you today. On this occasion, I will share with you a perspective on current conditions at the border, and also I will share some comments on the bilateral relations to consider given the first quarter of the year. As you've been hearing, our international border with Mexico, land border, I want to say, remains operating under restrictions only for some people crossings. Only our essential workers and US citizens and residents returning to the United States are allowed to cross from Mexico by land. No tourists, meaning visas B1 or B2, are crossing through our land port of entries. And our communities that experience or depend on interacting with our neighbors to the south are experiencing not only the health and the economic crisis of the pandemic, but as the entire San Diego region, but an aggravated one for this reason. After a year of pandemic, we learned that those that are crossing are our shared essential workers, those that have identified as the most vulnerable because they have been exposed to COVID-19. These are about 85,000 people crossing every day northbound through San Isidro and Otay Mesa, and the same amount flows every afternoon southbound. Many of these are dual nationals, Mexicans when in Mexico, but San Diegans when in the US. San Diegans living in Tijuana and are not intruders. On the other hand, goods and merchandise are flowing without restrictions. And in fact, trade increased last year. Shared production lines are working at full speed south of the border. Trade through our existing Otay Mesa port of entry was estimated in over $40 billion, meaning imports and exports from January to November of last year. When the restrictions will be lifted, we don't know. These decisions are made in Washington and Mexico. Regarding the state of the pandemic, while we move away from the purple tier in Southern California, south of the border in the state of Baja California, cases are also decreasing, and occupancy of COVID-19 cases in hospitals is lower than 15%, and most of the cases are treated as ambulatory. Vaccination has also started with population 60 and older. Mexico has received vaccines from Russia and China, and lately from the United States. And this is not because Mexico is not buying, this is not help. They are buying, but there has not been vaccines available. Now, regarding other important issues that I don't want to oversight are the followings. As you know, the new Biden administration announced the United States is rejoining the Paris Agreement. This announcement may reinvigorate the environmental agenda between the United States and Mexico, and our region should look to tools such as the EPA border programs, the La Paz Agreement, and NatBank might be playing a more important role. Also, at the end of the last administration, when we were in the middle of the pandemic, the new free trade agreement for North America was signed and went into effect, the new USMCA agreement. The USMCA was developed to address the needs of the 21st century economy and to develop an updated framework for environmental cooperation between the three countries. And yes, Mexico is a large market, but more than that, it is a strategic ally in global competitiveness, and our region is just in the middle of what it comes to happen in the future years. It will be up to us to take advantage of it if we want to stay as observers. In the meantime, our two countries announced also the revamping of the high-level economic dialogue, which represents an opportunity to advance some of our regional border topics. A third matter is a very, very sensitive subject that affects and impacts human lives and is also having direct impact in our region, the new immigration policies. The new federal administration has terminated some measures and programs and has announced the increase of judges at the border to process humanitarian cases. I think it's important to understand that these cases are of third countries, Central Americans, South Americans, Cubans, Russians, etc., but not Mexicans. Mexicans are deported immediately after they are detained. But thinking the DACA students and their families, or the deportation of these other third countries that are looking for humanitarian protection from starvation or threats to their lives, and thinking on the impact to their families. We are speaking of human beings. And last but not least, I want to remind you that this is a political year in Mexico, an important political year. Midterms elections will be held on June 6th, renovating the Federal Congress or Diputados. And just south of our border, all institutions will have a new leadership, a new governor, local Congress, and all 5 municipalities will be elected. This marks the last leg of the current federal administration in Mexico and promised to be intense. Because of all this, your Borders Committee has been addressing important topics such as the border wait times, impacts of border wait times, that ranges in billions of dollars and thousands of jobs for our region. And we are also reviewing new tools such as the new border master plan. Later this month, the Borders Committee will be reviewing the state of some border infrastructure, including CBX and the existing Otay Mesa port of entry. And next month, we'll join your transportation and regional planning committees to hear and discuss equity action plan for the 2021 regional plan. And with this, I conclude my report and would like to introduce my colleague, Robin Wagner, who will continue our report. Thank you.
Thank you, Hector. So just to round us out with the state update. So as you know, at the state level, we kind of have a 3-pronged approach, right? We have our legislative efforts, our funding, we're always hunting for dollars, and then the administrative regulatory side, where we know at the state level, especially, that's really where you start to see the rubber hit the road. So today I'm gonna start off with the administrative side because there's quite a few efforts that we've been spending our time on lately. The first I wanted to make sure that everyone is aware of is the Climate Action Plan for Transportation Infrastructure, otherwise known as CAPTI. So you've probably heard about this a little bit. If you remember, this was in, I think, the fall of 2018, the governor released Executive Order N1919, and this got a lot of attention because this is when he tasked all of his state agencies with doing everything that they can to help the state achieve our GHG targets. And so as part of that executive order, he tasked the California State Transportation Agency specifically to take a look at all of our transportation funding and how that can best be directed to let us all meet our goals throughout the state of mobility and environment. And so out of that has been born the CAPTI, the Climate Action Plan for Transportation. CalSTA, the State Transportation Agency, just released the draft plan earlier this year and has been holding several workshops. The California Transportation Commission received a presentation on it a couple of weeks ago, and just yesterday, the joint meeting of the Transportation Committee, the Air Resources Board, and the Housing and Community Development Department received a presentation on that. There's going to be a couple more workshops, and they're also seeking comment letters so they can start to finalize the document and begin to implement it. So as usual, Sandag is making sure that we are definitely at the table. The good news is that we are very much in line with where this document is headed in being able to balance all of our, like I said, mobility, environmental, equity, and housing goals. The other item that we are focused on right now is CalEnviroscreen. You've heard us talking about this for several years now. This is a document that comes out of the California Environmental Protection Agency, actually. It's based on statute, but it essentially sets up the construct for how disadvantaged communities are defined throughout the state. And as I'm sure you all know, this is important because many of the state funding programs use that definition to help direct dollars. Some of our challenges in the past with CalEnviroscreen was that it didn't necessarily take into account some of the unique nature of our San Diego region, given that we share the border with Mexico, as well as the large presence of military hospitals in our region. So we submitted comments on the last round for the 3.0 version of CalEnviroscreen. It looks like some improvements have been made, but we'll definitely have more requests to make so that CalEnviroscreen 4.0 is providing an accurate representation of the communities that are in our region. I also wanted to mention a rulemaking that's going on at the Public Utilities Commission that has to do with broadband. So there's something that's called the California Advanced Services Fund. This is important because this is how funds are distributed from the PUC to regions to support efforts to address the digital divide. So SANDAG is registering to become a party to that rulemaking so that we can help to compete for funds to come to our region so that we can improve broadband throughout our neighborhoods, which is probably a good segue into bills. So as usual, thousands of bills were introduced in the California legislative session that started in December and January. We have hundreds that are on the SANDAG list to monitor. And you're going to start hearing from us at your next meeting in May about specific bills that we would like to take positions on. The reason we do this is there's so many that are introduced. You kind of let a little bit of time pass. The first major milestone is April 30th, when any bills that will be moving forward this session have to get out of their policy committees. So we're kind of in a wait and see mode to see which ones actually float after that date. And then we can start to take some positions and make sure that we're engaging in the discussions that we need to. So like I said, several bills related to broadband that we're keeping our eye on, several related to SB 375 and the Regional Transportation Plan and Sustainable Community Strategy process that we are currently in the midst of. So keeping a very close eye on those. Just a heads up, there's one, SB 261 that was introduced by Senator Allen. This would build on the current requirements that we have for our RTP SES so that we would have our GHG targets, but also introduces a new VMT target. So it's gotten a lot of attention. I'll say a lot of opposition as well, but definitely kickstarting the discussion about where we go with SB 375 going forward. Resiliency is another very hot topic in Sacramento, which is great news for us because, as you know, we're trying to keep as much attention on the Del Mar Bluffs as we can to, again, attract dollars so we can implement the long-term solution. So we're engaging both with Senate Pro Tem Atkins on her bill, SB 1, as well as a coalition of authors on the Assembly side, including our Assembly member, Chris Ward, who have joined together behind AB 897. And this bill, essentially the idea is making sure that there's opportunity for coalitions to form within each region that can ultimately access funds to implement resiliency efforts at the regional level. Brown Act, another important topic that everyone's keeping an eye on, especially as the state continues to move through this reopening process. And SANDAG itself is considering, where do we go from here with hybrid meetings and things like that. So keeping an eye on that and coordinating with the League of California Cities to see where that all lands. And as usual, micromobility, active transportation, zero emission vehicles, and goods movement, all very hot topics at the state level this year as well. So a lot for us to talk about and keep an eye on. And like I said, we'll keep you updated and next month expect to start hearing some more specifics about bills. And then the last thing I just wanted to share is that it looks like we do now have our newest member of the San Diego Assembly delegation, Dr. Akila Weber. There's about 300 votes left to go, but she is at nearly 52% now. So I believe has been declared the victor. And so we will be working with her office to welcome her to the Assembly and see how we can be helpful now that she'll be working in Sacramento. That concludes our legislative report, and we are all available for any questions or comments you may have.
Well, thank you very much. I did have a question about the open meetings, the Brown Act. Does it look like it's headed toward requirements that everybody come back to meetings in person or that we continue to do meetings online? Which direction is that headed?
I would say that there's definitely a sense that folks like the option of having a hybrid. So I think that the challenge is just going to be finding the right balance so that you can offer that remote participation, but still ensure that the public always has the highest level of access to the discussions.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Vice Chair Gloria.
Thank you, Chair. Probably just a question for Lori. With regard to the infrastructure proposal, what is SANDAG doing currently to advocate for that? I recognize we generally like more federal funding for our projects in the context of the regional plan. It seems like that's pretty key. Reading the report from Pizer and Company, sounds like the path ahead is pretty rocky and maybe we need to be advocating. Anything that you can comment on with regard to what we're doing to keep this process moving forward?
Absolutely. As I said in the report, I think the next couple of months are going to be super crucial in making sure that we're meeting with the delegation, we're meeting with DOT officials, we're getting the word out that we have some big projects like Hassan was saying with the American Jobs Plan. There's a lot of alignment with what we're doing in our priority projects and where we want to go and where this plan aligns with. So I think there's ample opportunity for us to be engaging both our delegation on the department side, even with the Navy with some of our projects, just making sure that we're in the spotlight. If there's any areas for testimony and hearings, we're all on board to do that kind of work, and networking too. So working with our board leadership to kind of get the word out on how we can advance the priorities and principles in the plan.
Okay, we'll make sure we're being aggressive. That sounds like a very large price tag and kind of a part of our rural regional transportation plan where we anticipate opportunities like this. And I read the comments about politics, that's less interesting to me. I just want to make sure we're advocating and making sure that at least our delegation is well informed about what SANDAG feels needs to be in this proposal and ask them for their support.
Absolutely. I think we have a very, very strong relationship with our delegation, and we're very lucky that they work really well with one another too. I think that's unlike many other regions in the state and the nation. So yeah.
Thank you, Lori.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. Any other board questions or comments? Okay, well, thank you for the great, interesting presentation at all three levels there. So the next meeting of our executive committee is May 14th. And this concludes this meeting, and I will see you in 3 minutes for our board meeting. So we are officially adjourned.